Hey, welcome everybody to another video by TechBeats. Today we'll be installing DVWA on kalilinux VM within VirtualBox. Now, DVWA, if you don't know, is the Damn Vulnerable Web Application. So it's a pen testing platform, more specifically web application testing, and it'll allow you to practice some of the skills that you need to be able to test web applications. So for this video, the only thing I'm not going to show you really is how to install Kali Linux on a VM on VirtualBox. So I'll assume you know that. If not, I do have another video, so just have a look or I'll give you guys a link below. So I'm just going to log into the VM now. And what we'll do, we'll have a look at the GitHub page. Let's go through Firefox. And the link is https github.com, and then I want to say DigiNinja. At least that's how it reads to me. And this is basically where the application is hosted. And we can see here, this is the GitHub page. And if we just go over to the README, you can see a little bit about it as well as other information as well. Essentially, it's a PHP MySQL web application, and it's deliberately made vulnerable so you can actually see vulnerabilities if you've never checked or tested them before. So it's really good to practice on and build up from there. There's various levels that you can change it to, so that's another point about it as well. Now, this shouldn't be uploaded to your hosting provider's public HTML folder or any internet-facing servers. So doing it within a virtual machine, like I said at the beginning, VirtualBox or VMware is probably the best way to go. And as it says there, set the networking mode to NAT, which is something that you do via the settings. Now, we're going to go step by step on the install. And there's basically 7 steps that I've drawn out here. So step 1 is downloading the damn vulnerable web application. Step 2 is configuring the DVWA. Step 3, install MySQL on Kali Linux. Step 4, configure MySQL Database. Step 5, install PHP. Step 6, configure Apache Server. Step 7, which is the final one, access DVWA on your web browser and make sure it's all working okay. Now, 2 ways that you can install it is the most easiest way is probably to install the XAMPP, as I like to pronounce it, which is basically a zip file, and that's basically got all the packages in there as a stack. And all you'd need to do is simply unzip the DVWA zip, place the unzipped file in the public HTML folder, and then point your browser to the address, which would essentially be the same as what we're going to do, which is http://127.0.0.1 or localhost /dvwa/setup.php. Now we're actually going to do the manual version, so this is slightly longer, but I want to do each component so you kind of see what's going on in the background. What we're going to do is configure Apache Server MySQL. You can also use MariaDB, but that's not what we're going to be using today. So we can come out of Firefox now, so let's just exit from here. First thing that you're going to want to do, step 0 if you like, is update all your repositories. So make sure you do that first before you proceed any further. Now what we're going to do, we're going to spend a bit of time in the terminal. So we're going to do Control-Alt-T to bring a terminal tab up. Just make this a little bit bigger so everyone can see what's going on. First step, we're going to download DVWA. We need to make sure that we're in the right directory so the location is correct once we do the installation. Let's do cd/var/www/HTML. Next thing we need to do, now that we're in the directory, we need to clone the DVWA GitHub repository, which we saw earlier, into this directory. Sudo git clone and then the URL https://github.com/, I'm going to say DigiNinja. Like I say, apologies if I've got that wrong, but you can see the spelling here, /DVWA. Spelling looks okay, so we'll press enter, enter your password to authorize that to happen. Now that will just take a few moments, and that's done now. Now after cloning, easiest thing I would suggest you do is just rename that file because it's in capitals and this is all case sensitive. So if we just change that to lowercase, that'll just make life a little bit easy to basically use the directory or file. So sudo, we've got the mv command, and then what it is now, DWVA in capitals, and what we want it to be, DVWA in lowercase. Done a typo. DVWA, DVWA, there you go. So now if we look in that directory again, you'll see it's basically just changed to lowercase. Cool. Right, so that's that bit done. So step one, done. Now we'll move on to step two. That's configuring DVWA. We need to make some minor configuration changes. So it's the read, write, and execute permissions to the DVWA directory that we're going to do. Chmod R777, so this is applying those permissions that we need. And now we can address this file in the lowercase. DVWA, spell it right this time. I think we need to do sudo. Okay. So sudo chmod, then dash capital R777, and then DVWA. Right, so that is now done. We need to set up the user and password required to actually access the database. So let's change directory to point to the config directory. And to do that, we're going to do change directory DVWA /config. Okay. So basically, if you haven't used Kali, this section here is the current path that you're in. So it allows you to check that you are in the right place or where you are if you're kind of going in and out of directories, as we will be. So let's run the ls command and see what's in here. We can see the config.inc.php.dist. Now this is the original file containing the default configurations. What I'd suggest we do is don't edit this main, I'm going to call it the primary config. Instead, we're going to create a copy and use that instead. So this main one will just stay as our backup in case anything goes wrong and we need to go back to it or copy another one. So sudo copy, and we'll just basically copy the file above, config.inc.php.dist, and then what we're going to call the new version of it. So config.inc.php will be fine. Press enter, and that should be done. And now we've got two of those files. So one which was the main one that we downloaded, and the other one which is the copied version. We're going to make some config changes, and we're going to do that in Nano, or using Nano, the editor. What we need to do is amend the user and the password. Need to input sudo nano, that's the text editor, and then the file above that we just created, so config.inc.php PHP should open. Okay. And what we need to do is just navigate to the relevant fields and amend them accordingly. So here we just use arrow keys and one. The DB database, DVWA is fine. So we want user. I'm going to change this to user and password to pass. And that's all we need to do. So to save the file, it's Control and O, and then press Enter. And then when it says wrote 61 lines, that's basically saying that it's effectively saved it. That's it. So we can minimize this one. Step 2's out the way. We can move on to step 3, which is installing MySQL on kalilinux. Now I say install, but kalilinux, at least as of now, comes out of the box with MySQL in and Apache 2, which is coming up next. So open another terminal. We're just going to check that we've got the MySQL server already installed, which it should be anyway, but let's check it. So it's usually referred to as MySQL-server, and what you might see, as it's red, it's basically saying it doesn't recognize that syntax or the syntax is wrong. If I press enter, actually, version, so assuming that it was installed, I'd see the version. It says command not found. Now just to show you something here, if you ever want to search something and you don't know exactly what it's called because everything's case sensitive, then what you can do is do apt search. Don't think you need sudo, but we'll check it out in a second. MySQL server. And what that will do is check, it's like a grep. It will basically check everything with that in and give you the full actual name. As you can see here, the reason it couldn't find MySQL server is because it's actually called default-mysql-server. This is also a way that you can use apt install, because if you know the name of it, installations like Chrome, for example, might not just be called Chrome. It might be Google-Chrome. This will help you work out what it's actually called and download the right application. So just a little tip there. What we can do now is I don't need to type that command in again, because here you can see it says it's installed. Now, if you wanted the core version of it, that is saying it's available. That what's in green is what you would need to actually input if you wanted to download it, but we don't need it here. It's just to show the difference between something that is installed, which we need, and that's fine, we can move on, and something that isn't, just in case you need that for future. If you did need to install it, like I said before, you've got the actual name of it, and just to really make that clear, you would type in sudo apt install and then exactly how the search came out. So MySQL-server there. So that syntax is right. I'm not going to press enter because I've actually got it. Don't want to potentially mess anything up. So we'll just leave that as it is. If you've got that like I have, step 3 is complete. If you haven't, I've just shown you how to install it so you can catch up with us. So we can move on to step 4, which is now configure MySQL database. So as we've got MySQL database, we just need to run the service. So this is in readiness to start using DVWA. So how you do that, sudo service, this is how you start pretty much any service. Then the name of it, MySQL, and then start. To put your password in, and that's done. Now, Linux, if you're familiar with it, it only really tells you when something is wrong. So at this stage, you might be thinking, is it actually running? So what we can do then, systemctl, check the status, MySQL. And what we want to see is basically active and running, which I can see in the green there. And you can see when it was started, which is just a moment ago. All of that looks fine. So now we're going to just make some changes in the MySQL database as well. So we'll log into the database as root. If you've got another name set for the super user in your system, use that name instead of root. Let's open another terminal. Sudo MySQL, U for user is root, and then -p password. We actually haven't set one, so there's nothing to enter here. This is your actual system password, nothing to do with MySQL. It will ask you for a password. There you go, enter password. This is relevant for the database. As we haven't set one, we just press enter and we are logged in. We're going to create a new user with the username and password that we set in our DVWA application config file. So in my case, and if you're following me, it'll be the same. Username was user, password was pass. Server that we're using is localhost, so that's 127.0.0.1, or you can refer to it literally typing in localhost. Create user and single quotes, that's going to be user at, and then localhost again in single quotes 127.0.0.1, then identified by in single quotes pass and then semicolon. Enter. Query OK. Thumbs up. We can move on. Next thing we need to do is grant this new user privilege over the actual DVWA database. So let's execute that. So grant all. In fact, what we're going to do, just bring up the previous command by pressing up, and then we'll just amend it. Grant all privileges on dvwa.star or wildcard, whatever you want to call it, to and this user. Okay, that looks fine. So let's press enter. Something wrong in the syntax. There we go. I think it's a spelling error. There we go. That's all it was. Now, up to this point, we're basically done configuring DVWA application and the MySQL database. So we can actually come out of that or just minimize it if you want to. Either is fine. Now, step 5 is installing PHP. Again, like MySQL, should come right out of the box. So I'm just going to check that now. So this is PHP -- version, and I've got the latest version on here, so no need to do anything further here. If you wanted to, you could install it by using the tip I showed you before. All you'd have to do, sudo apt install php, and then whatever the latest version would be. So in my case, 7.4, and then you'd put a yes next to it just to auto complete. So I don't need to do that. It's done already, as you saw. So we are good to move on. Step number 6, configuring Apache Server. Clear that. Now, first what we need to do is get into the Apache Server. Now, if you're not sure of how to navigate round, then we can do this by GUI as well, just so you've got another way to look at it. Okay, so this is our folder, and effectively what we're doing is we're going to go into the file system, etc, or etc as I call it, PHP, which is there, 7.4 is the file name, and then there's Apache 2. I believe we can open terminal here, so let's have a look. You could either type it out or you can go to the directory or in the GUI path and open terminal there as well. Now just remember, if you've got a different version, as time goes on, this will update. Of course, it won't be 7.4 any longer. You'll probably need to just replace that with your relevant version. Bear that in mind if you get any errors or problems. Now, if we do the ls command, we should see what we saw previously in the GUI, which is basically a file called php.ini. Here it is here. Now, this is the file that we need to edit to configure our local host server. We need to do sudo nano php.ini. So that's going to open the text editor in that file. Now, we just need to look for 2 lines of code, and I'll show you where they are. Now, this file is pretty big. Now, if I scroll down here, you'll see it kind of just goes on and on. So what we're going to do is do Control W, Control W, and that would allow us to do a little search function. So let's put allow underscore URL underscore open, and that's what we're looking for. Now we want to make sure this is set to on. which it is in my case, so we're good there. The next one you want to do is this one. So allow URL include. We also want to make sure this is on, so we're going to just change that. Apart from that, that's it. So let's save that. Control and O, enter, and then Control and X to exit out of it. Perfect. Now we're going to start the service of Apache. Clear this screen, and then as previously, the way we start any service, so sudo service, and then this is going to change now, Apache to start. That's it. Doesn't really tell you that it's started, but we can again check systemctl status. There we go. We've got an active running from just a moment ago when we executed the command. So that all looks good there. So everything's set up, ready to go. That's it. We've got everything configured and we can proceed to launch the DVWA. So we're going to open the browser and enter the URL. Let's just go through terminal. Firefox, http // and then localhost 127.0.0.1 and then that file path DVWA. Enter, and then that should load Firefox with that URL embedded already. There we go, perfect. So it will go to the default location of setup.php. That's fine, that's what it's meant to do. Here we can see some reds. We'll go through those in a second. And then what we need to do is just configure, as our services are running, create and reset database. So database has been created, users table is created, and it's just taken that off. So let's log in. So username is admin, password is password. We can save that, just makes it easy for next time, not a problem. And then here we can see a little summary. So username, admin, security level, impossible. Might want to lower that if this is your beginner go. And then a couple of other information which aren't too relevant right now. If you want to change the security level here, just go into DVWA security and then change that down to start off with low, for example. Submit, and then there you go, that's changed the level down low. So this is the level of attacks that you'll be doing will go from low right up to high. So that's everything that we need, and you can get started with the pen testing element of web application. And what I intend to do is get some further videos up as I gradually work through all of these different tasks. So you can see brute force, lots of common ones here in the OWASP top 10. Although that regularly changes, the bulk of this will generally be in there. Now, if you're setting up an Ubuntu server, you can't actually access this locally. So you need to use another computer or VM on the same network instead. Open that browser and enter the IP of that server instead of this local host address here, and you'll be able to check it there as well. Again, the default page setup.php is the same. And every time that you return or open this, so you close it, come back to it, then once you fire up the virtual machine, you'll need to make sure that you restart or start MySQL Database and Apache 2. Unless you start those services, this won't load because that's where it's running from. Hopefully you found that useful. That's everything set up, and hopefully you'll join me in future videos. Thank you for watching.